Hello, welcome back with me on this Chinese business culture series. Today we'll be focusing on business meetings. In China, as in the rest of the world, business means a lot of meetings every day, day in, day out. But when you meet with the Chinese people, having meetings with them, there are a few culturally relevant things we really need to remember. Formality in terms of meetings very often is reflected in the way you seat people, the seating arrangement, and also in the way you address people, like the titles you need to give when you address each other, as well as the welcoming ceremony. So the way you shake hands, the way you greet each other, the way you actually communicate with people, all these need to be done with a very clear sense of formality. And people are normally on the formal side rather than informal side. There is one complexity here we need to remember is one, the seniority and the age, the two factors work together, which one we really need to go with. In that case, I'll give you an example. When I was attending a meeting in Beijing recently, there was two people, very important VIP, came together. One is the current minister, another one is the retired, the former minister. So in terms of the seating, normally it goes, the person who is senior in rank should really occupy the most important position or the seat. However, in this case, because the former minister is much older in age, and therefore, when the seating arrangement came, so this former minister actually was given the most prominent, the most important seat. So in China, when you talk about formality, talk about seniority, do not forget the age factor.
I think one thing is that in terms of a more formal business meeting, the preparation time, perhaps the lead time is longer. And it's necessary perhaps to get things started. It takes longer. Let's say the process takes longer, especially if it's an important meeting. So one should allow plenty of time to even get started, from the very beginning.
You're right, Diana, here. But what's your advice here? How much lead time do you really need to at least consider?
I guess the more important the meeting, then the longer lead time, because perhaps of the people involved and their schedules. And so maybe a month, 6 weeks, even possibly 2 months.
Yeah, that's true. So what do we really need to remind ourselves to do in this preparation?
Well, one thing would be to make sure that you have an interpreter that is familiar with the technical terms of what's going to be discussed. Don't rely on the guest or the host to provide that.
Well, I think who would be attending the meeting is very important, because in China it's very hierarchical, conscious, and so depending on who they're sending, then you really should match that same level. If they're sending a vice president, you really should not be sending somebody, a department head. You need to send a vice president.
But in China, when it comes to a meeting, very often the decision is prior decided already, or the decision is already made. The meeting is really just a ceremony, and very often it's just a procedure to go through to announce the decision rather than for the decision making. So be careful, do not confront people openly in meetings. And you also have to remember that at meetings, very few people come up with any spontaneous discussions or spontaneous presentations. People are so accustomed to reading things from the previously prepared paper, the documents.
Americans may be used to, especially if they're fairly senior people, they think that maybe decisions will be taken at the meeting. let's move on, let's get things done. And I think for the most part, that just doesn't happen here. And so the expectations need to be realistic and to be set ahead of time.
It should be adjusted according to the local culture.
Right.
In China, largely speaking, meeting is really a process. A process of finding out from each other and the positions, the viewpoints, and also figuring out what to do. I mean, in terms of the issues in focus. And it's after the meeting very often the decision is made and then circulated and bringing back another meeting. To get a decision really accepted. When it comes to informal meetings, again, do not forget Chinese people always observe face and relationship. Even during informal meetings in companies or in your workplace, people avoid confronting each other. However, in formal meetings, I think there are more discussions going on. Even so, you may feel the Chinese people are so quiet. I attended quite a number of meetings with Chinese people as well as people from the rest of the world, like UNESCO. And you would feel, wow, all of a sudden there are two camps, and people tend to listen, people tend to give you some facial recognition, but they are not as actively participating verbally as you would expect in other countries or in other situations. So what do we do when we meet Chinese people or when we have meetings with Chinese people? I strongly advise that we should not judge by the silence. At the same time, we should really come up with some strategies to handle this big silence very often occurs at meetings. Try to make your conversations or speak in an encouraging way rather than confrontational way, and try to preserve the face while encouraging them to talk. I think the least you can do is to name them. I think people do not mind here to be asked to present their comments. I think very often people do wait for you to call the name, saying, "Hi Hua, what would you like to say here? Hi, do you have anything to comment here?" What you normally see the Chinese people do with their expressions, their words. Do you hear a lot of yes?
I don't think you hear a lot of yes. You're saying yes, but they mean they just hear you. They understand. It's certainly not yes, they agree.
Yeah, so yes should not be taken as a solid yes in the English, in the American English here. Yes means yes, also means I'm here with you, I hear you, I understand you. So do not take yes just as a single meaning yes.
That's right.
Yeah.
Very true.
I've had discussions with my IE where I thought she was understanding what I'm saying and agreeing with me. And then I found out after she left or the next day that she really didn't understand, but she was shaking her head and saying yes. So I think you have to take it always with a little grain of salt, that the yes isn't like the Western's impression of yes.
This is another reason for starting early.
Starting
because
early.
it's going to take, the process will take long.
Exactly. And patience at the meeting, patience before the meeting, and even patience after the meeting.
Absolutely. As you were saying, a lot of the real decisions are made in discussions after the meeting.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
And there are important things to do to follow up.
So meeting successfully requires you, again, to switch your cultural style, to switch your mindset so that you can really have a successful meeting. Good luck again with your meetings here in China, and see you next time. Hello, welcome to our Chinese Business Cultural Program. Today, we are going to talk about how to negotiate with the Chinese here. First is the relationship, the concept of 关系, relationship. There are many sayings here about the relationship, the importance of it in negotiation. And in Chinese, very often people say, 生意可以不做，但人情一定要讲, which means even if we don't have a business or we don't have a deal with each other, we still have the relationship. In the negotiation process, always remember to show your courtesy and respect through the words you use, the expressions you use, and also a lot of the nonverbal expressions as well. Secondly, we really need to remember patience. In China, time is not really as that much regarded as a single focus sort of practice as in many countries like in America. So allow more time for the negotiation than you normally would do. You should remember that in China, the business practice is a very complex picture situation here. There might be many hidden agendas. There might be many procedures or papers or agreements that one needs to get from different kinds of government departments. And also, the way Chinese people negotiate is different too. And very often, you may end up thinking why they go around the topic, why they reopen the topics which seem to have already settled in the previous steps. Yes, I think the Chinese people here very often start with a general picture, generalities instead of specifics. So very often they want to have a big picture clear first before they want to, or they are ready to talk about any specific terms with you, and that needs time. Patience, yes, you need it, because Chinese people are also very detail-oriented too. They really want to get to the bottom of each deal and really knowing exactly what's going on before they can make the final decision.
In China, you need to be patient.
A lot of the Western people, they come in, they look for a quick deal, and they have a fixed time schedule. Does that always work, or you think it's better to be more flexible with the time and not to show any sort of signs of impatience?
The final contract negotiations more kind of a ceremonial thing for the two party, but a lot of the initial detail work really need to be worked out either with your local staff or your more junior staff who have came into China earlier and are prepared to really work out all the mechanisms.
The other factor we cannot forget is flexibility. So having a flexible mind that look at each case from an open-minded perspective rather than having a fixed mentality, which doesn't work here at all. Therefore, be ready to allow ambiguities. Be ready to accept a lot of the differences in the practice and having a flexible approach that will allow you to really carry on having a better chance to succeed in negotiating with the Chinese people. During the negotiation process, I think there are three very distinct features here. And Chinese people really belong to a so-called high context culture, which means they very often talk in a more roundabout way to avoid any possible confrontations in a face-to-face situation, trying to leave room for people to retreat, trying to talk in a way that people can still have the possibility to keep the faith and respect. The other way I think Chinese people talk, which is different from the Western way, is they are very indirect communicators and try to avoid using very direct yes or no when you are negotiating with them. When a yes is given, try to understand if it is a real yes, a genuine yes, or it is a yes out of politeness. So what can we do then? During the formal conversations or formal negotiations, things may not be expressed clearly or expressed very precisely. So afterwards, use some small talks, use some informal occasions, and try to talk to people in order to double check your understanding of their yes or no's. Well, talking about no's, I think it is not in the habit of Chinese people to give you a very frank no each time when they really mean no.
Negotiations here, listening is very important. You really need to listen to what the Chinese side is indicating. A little bit like Japanese negotiation, because of this face scenario, your Chinese negotiator may not say no, right? And he say, "Wow, we think about it." Maybe the negotiator is really saying that, well, we don't accept this. Do you have another terms? Or is there a middle ground, right? And rarely in the Chinese negotiation, the Chinese negotiator will say no, right? And say, well, we'll think about it. We'll come back to you. Let's have a drink. Then you need to watch the language and the body language, and maybe you have second options or other possibilities. You need to find out like why can't we move towards a conclusion.
Chinese people use the language when they express themselves. They try not to show their excessive emotions. So they try to keep their emotions inside rather than express it through their words, through their facial expressions, through their voice. They keep calm. So they normally view people who are easy to blow up, who are easy to be angry or to be excited, as people who are immature. So when you talk, try not to be so emotional outwardly, and especially try not to show your anger, try not to show your frustration. Keep calm, keep cool, and that will be a much, much better way to deal with the Chinese people in negotiation. In China, contract traditionally is not viewed as final. So contract very often is viewed as a goodwill, the wish to work together, the wish to do things together. So if it happens to you, people really come back after the contract is signed and want to continue the negotiation after the contract is signed, I think you really need to be prepared for things to come up even the contract is here. It is again very much a cultural thing. But I think the better way or the better precaution you need to take is to make everything very explicitly explained to the Chinese side, so that you can get a better sort of protection for your contract rights.
Sometimes, because of the difference in the legal system, a contract, is not as strict as in the Western sense, and the mutual feeling and relationship between the parties sometimes are again even more important, and China is still moving towards a more complete understanding of the contracts in a Western sense, and so. Even though a contract is signed, it is still very important to maintain the really good relationship. So when there's any misunderstanding or any dispute that comes up, then the both parties can sit down and resolve it. That could be even more important than what is on 5 pieces of paper.
Okay, so the commitment to work things out rather than just take legal action right away whenever there is a problem.
That is a very fundamental difference.
Right, and good luck with your negotiation in China. And I think there is a lot to learn, but if you remember the principles, which is relationship, patience, and flexibility, you won't be far gone from here. Thank you, and see you next time. Hello, welcome back with me again today on this Chinese Business Culture series. And now we are going to focus on conflict handling in China. Conflict is everywhere, but it's expressed and received certainly in a very different way from culture to culture. In China, what do we do? What do we need to know about this conflict handling? There are a few suggestions I would like to raise here. First, try to avoid confrontational expression of your conflicts. Now, again, I want to say, try to be non-confrontational in the way you handle conflicts. So we should really learn to do so as well. any face-to-face or confrontational social expression of conflicts can easily harm your relationship